Hello and welcome to the EconBuff podcast. I'm your host, Lee Stitzel. With me today is Dr. Harry Hueston. Dr. Hueston is a WTAMU retired professor of criminal justice. He's also a former police chief after 30 years in law enforcement, serving in various positions in Ohio, California, Arizona, and the U.S. Army Military Police. He's a certified peace officer in Ohio, Arizona, and the U.S. Army. He's also the author of 3 true crime books, The Hunt, and The Hope, all of which are available on Amazon.com. Harry, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me here, Lee, and I appreciate the opportunity to sit down and talk about this very interesting topic with you.
So our topic today is what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania when there was an assassination attempt on then candidate for President Donald Trump. But before we get to that, because I happen to know you have some experience with this stuff, which of course is why you're on the podcast, can you just tell us a little bit about your experience with assassinations, protective detail, stuff like that?
Sure. My experience, and I've been very fortunate in my career, the first major experience I had that would fit into this category actually was before you were born. It was actually in 1984, where I was the director of security of an Olympic weightlifting event at Loyola Marymount University. And that event was planned for and worked at and evolved security for over 2.5 years before the first day of the event. So the planning, and that's what I feel is important, the planning for this Olympic security event followed those events in Munich. And so the planning and the amount of training and exercises, and there were 40 agencies involved in that one event, that provided me some insight into future examples of sitting presidents who actually came to the University of Arizona. And when you are talking similar set of circumstances, when a sitting president comes to any event, there is a protocol that was used then, and that protocol was an advance team would come out 6 months ahead of the event. And then that was your start date. And then you worked almost hand in hand with every agency in the state that was going to be involved, even minutely, in the visit itself. And the critical part about all this was the integration of planning, the understanding of roles and responsibilities, and communications. And what makes this difficult and consistently makes it difficult was when you're working with a federal agency, their communication is not meshing with state or local communications. And so it's imperative that you have key personnel who are the decision makers in a same room with access to all 3 lines of different communications. And at that time, there was a model that was called ICS, Incident Command Systems. And that was beginning, the fire department have used that type of planning since the 1950s. Police and law enforcement began to use that in the late 1990s and into the 2000s, and that is a model that is now used by both police and fire in handling major incidents. The closest I came to what we want to talk about today was we had then a sitting Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright. And Miss Albright was going to be the feature commencement speaker at our June or May graduation, and I'm not sure what year, late 90s. And the really problem that we had at that time was the fact that the event itself was in a contained area called McHale Center. we could hold around 16,600 or so. That was inside. The problem was at that time, there was a large number of protesters. The estimated crowd size of these protesters ranged anywhere between 6,000 to 9,000 people. So you're looking at a threat level that is deemed very high, and then you have another additional threat outside. And so that event really, that was a huge security nightmare. And we got through it, and we got through it because we had excellent cooperation with the people who were in charge. We had a whole nuance in that the Secretary of Defense brought her own police department with her, as well as the Secret Service. And then you had, I think, 10 other agencies involved with the DPS, two county sheriff's office, multitudes of the city police, multitudes of my own police at the university. And so that was a nightmare. But through the grace of great planning, communication, coordination, and we didn't have this territorial stuff, which I think is critically important that I have found in our incident, but it worked. Now, we had a lot of threats, and we were dealing with active intelligence, and we knew that there were at least 3 or 4 known specific threats that we were looking for at this event. But we knew about it ahead of time. We had staffing. We were adequately equipped with deadly force if we needed to take those kind of actions. And we had a spirit of cooperation that you're not going to have anything happen to this person on our watch. And that was an attitude that prevailed. And so, I mean, we got her in or not. We handled the demonstrators. We had people inside. We got them quickly out of the way. I thought it was a very successful event, and she was in and out in about 90 minutes. That included giving her 30-minute response, then putting her into a limousine and escorting her to the airport. And goodbye, thank you very much. Appreciate this, and let's get on with normal life.
There's a couple things that strike me there. So one is you got to do 6 months of preparation, but a president, or in this case, like a candidate for president, they're doing stops every day.
Yeah.
They're going places every week.
Right.
Is that happening in every single one of those?
I believe that, yes, anytime there is an individual who he or she announces candidacy for the President of the United States, they are going to be automatically assigned a detail. And the size of that detail is going to be predicated upon the event site and other situations or circumstances that are going to come up. And you're right. That stretches people's and resources to the max. Because in this particular case, you're not looking at 6 months. I mean, you're looking at barely 2 weeks. And that adds to the problem of security. That adds to the problem of site assessment. This site was outside as opposed to contained inside. You also have to deal with the fact that law enforcement today is not fully staffed like they were in the latter part of the 1990s. And that is a fact of life. And so you are dealing with, right off the bat, you're dealing with a shortage of critical manpower because you do not have the numbers of people working in the field. And that contributed drastically to the problems that we had here in Butler.
So you said you've got 10 agencies that you're working with when you're coordinating
Right.
for your commencement event. Is that because you need that kind of manpower, or is that because there's different strategic things that different agencies bring to a situation like that?
It's both. Okay, within our police department, you can mandate that all off-duty officers who normally would have a day off, you would bring them in to work just assign posts or areas inside and outside where the venue is. And so McHale, we knew that place. And the other thing is firsthand knowledge of the venue is a critical factor when you're dealing with any kind of incident that has a high threat level, and that you need, me, the chief, or the variety of chiefs, deputy directors of the Department of Public Safety. Albright brought her own chief, and he had his officers out there. And we all had various assigned duties and responsibilities. That was part of that incident command system that we could integrate, and then the lines of communication. So manpower is critical. And then you hit another important thing. You have to bring in specifically trained, in this particular case, snipers. And that is an incredible task that we have to have given the threat assessment or the title of the person involved. And you don't have snipers, you don't run them through a week-long course. Most of these snipers have years and years and years and years of training. And so to say you have a large contingency of snipers is not true. You facilitate and you bring in these specialists from a variety of agencies because you have strategic points that you've got to cover in your security evaluation of where this individual is going to be. And by the way, these are individuals that not only have to be specifically trained, they have to have a track record. You don't bring in a rookie sniper. Oh, we're going to set you up, and it doesn't work that way. You have trained personnel that have done this over years. The fact of the matter is, there are not a lot of them out there anymore because they have retired. And the idea that we're trying to replace both law enforcement personnel as well as specialty fields. I mean, we didn't even talk about bomb threats. And so you need bomb squads. You need teams of bomb dogs. I mean, we had 4 different teams of bomb dogs going through not only the venue, but we had adjacent garages. So we had to go through and do all that. And some of the venues are very large where they have basements. And you have cars driving in and out, and that was the case here at McHale, where you could drive cars in and drive them out. Well, then you got to make sure that your venue is secure, and that is an ongoing process. I would say it's going to end and start, and it really doesn't work that way. I mean, you've got to lock down and secure your facility to the best of your ability. And when you're talking a large facility, that's not a one-person operation. And you've got to ensure that, by the way, you're interrupting people that are doing very particular jobs. So you have to have somebody there at a designated point that they go in and out, and they're signed in and they're signed out, credentials are checked, so that's one place. But when you have a venue that's huge, like McHale, or take one of these arenas like Dallas Stadium, I mean, you need literally dozens of security or cops that are going to be able to secure the place and that are looking for and able to report suspicious activity, which is another thing that occurred at this particular site that it appears that there was a failure to communicate in numerous instances here. So,
the one more thing I want to ask before you give us kind of a brief rundown overview, and then we kind of get into this particular event, is you'd mentioned you had 3 or 4 particular threats that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. Is it generally the case that when you're in this kind of situation, that you have specific people and threats and types, and therefore you might know something about them, what they look like, or what their tactics might be? Or can it be more of a general thing where it's like we don't really know who might be a person of interest in this case?
Well, that question is going to be predicated upon the history of individuals who have been known or have been involved in prior assassination attempts. And like I mentioned before, in the Journal of Forensic Science, in the year 2000, a group of academicians did a study. It was called Assassination in the United States, an operational study of recent assassin attackers and near lethal approaches. And this is where you get, in my opinion, you got to plan for everything and expect everything. And that's what makes this kind of an incident so hard to go ahead and prepare for. Your threats, depending upon the title or the office that the individual holds, they can range from anywhere from 10 to 20 to thousands.
Right.
And in Albright, when she visited our venue, at that time we felt we had 5 viable possibilities. They involved assassination, they involved bombing, they involved a chemical substance, and some sort of disruption, diversion. And that's the other thing that you got to always remember. You can set these things up. You can have a diversion, fire alarm, somebody lights someplace on fire, something to draw the attention of those involved in the security away from the primary person they are protecting, and that's when you can get hit. Those are the kind of dynamics that you're talking about. And welcome to planning for and dealing with that level of a specific target, like a president or a vice president or a secretary or a judge or whomever is visiting.
So let's set the table here for the event that we're going to talk about. When I first approached you, I was like, man, there's been one successful high-profile assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, then 2 different attempts on candidate and now President Donald Trump's life. And, for somebody that's my age and in mid-30s, it's like presidential assassinations, successful ones in particular, like that's kind of a little bit distant past. So for that to be such a topic this year just really piqued my interest, and that's what I wanted to bring this about it. It's a pretty pivotal moment in modern politics from the perspective of somebody that's my age. The attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, on July 13th of 24. Can you kind of like briefly describe that and set that stage for us?
Sure. On this particular date, there was a 20-year-old individual. His name was Thomas Crook. Research on him now, even today, the motive of his attack is still not clear. There's a bunch of speculation. They being the FBI, the Secret Service, looked into all his electronic stuff. They really still haven't found the motive. And he, at 20 years old, had gone to the venue. He lived about 30 miles away. He lived relatively close. What attracted him to Donald Trump on that particular day, it's all speculation. He did research on targeted Trump, Obama, a few other people ahead of time. They scanned his computer and found all this stuff. But on that particular day, in a nutshell, he crawled up a place called the American Glass Research Building. This was an outside venue. He got on top of a roof, and he managed to crawl up that roof using an HVAC ladder that was available that he could crawl up. Then he set up in a position on that roof that was approximately 400 feet from where Donald Trump would be speaking. And they estimated at 6:11, he opened up with an AR-15 that was a modified stock, shot 8 bullets in the course of, I believe, as fast as you can pull a trigger on an automatic rifle, and then was shot and killed by a sniper who was on a building that was in the line of sight across from where he was at. As a result of that, the president turned his head, or I believe he'd have been dead. But he got his right ear nicked, and then unfortunately, one of the bystanders was killed at the scene, and 2 others were very seriously injured. And that whole scenario, start the shooting to finish, probably last 90 seconds before the president was down, covered, and the Secret Service took him out. But there's more to the story than just this incident.
Okay, so you're teasing this. My automatic question is just, how does something like this happen? How do you... My instinct kind of is actually to ask the first question, to be, how do you allow somebody with a rifle within 130 yards of a candidate on a roof that's visible from where it is? You know, as somebody who's a shooter myself, 130 with an AR-15, it's no chip shot, but it's makeable. I mean, I don't think this guy has to be... He's not one of your missing snipers.
No.
But probably somebody doesn't just day one get a rifle and make a shot like that. So what are your security elapses that allow somebody that seemingly has no training into a position like that on a day like this?
Okay. There are a number of issues that contributed to what happened at that time and date. Let's name a few. Number one, the venue. Open. Worst. Very difficult to secure. And
is that because there's so many places you can come and go from?
Yes, okay. You have an open venue. I mean, it was like a fairground.
Yeah.
So you have outside buildings. The candidate wants to be outside. They want to mix. They want to shake hands. Okay, they want to be integrated into the crowd. And by the way, that is not just a philosophy or an attitude of just the president. That is an attitude of most elected officials that I have been charged to either guard or provide some type of protection. They got to get out and get into the crowd, which provides so many opportunities for these kind of things to happen at a close range, let alone a shot that's over 400 feet that, through the grace of the good Lord above, he wasn't killed. But unfortunately, there was a death and serious injury, and it occurred. So the idea, let's start with the first thing. Where is the venue? What does it look like? How do you protect it? This particular case, the venue's wide open. If the venue's wide open, we're going to need to ensure we have got a way to secure the venue. this is not from me, but the number of independent reviews that have been done just on this incident are incredible. So one of the first things that comes in was your question. How does this happen? In this particular case, there are a number of things that were wrong. And in my opinion, what made them wrong was the fact that you have candidates that are coming and going in relatively quick time periods. And during a presidential candidacy, you see this all the time. This means that you're first limited with manpower, and then you're dealing with venues that are limited with manpower before any of this starts. So you're taking a limited resource and you're stretching it. That was one of the things that came up. We were told to do more with less. We've heard that before as a standard motto of today's world. Do more with less and do it more efficiently. Okay. That's one of the contributing factors here. When you open up things that size, how are you going to secure that? Secret Service doesn't have the manpower for that. That's going to fall on the local jurisdictions, which in this case, the local jurisdictions was the Pennsylvania State Police or the Butler Sheriff's Department. And then you'll have these little townships or burgs. They're going to call in anybody and everybody to just have people to guard or secure the area. The other thing in this particular case, because a lot of questions have come up since, how do you get a gun, let alone a rifle, into the place? Well, if you set the inner security at a certain distance, then what about those people who are outside? Okay, and so the inner security for this was determined by the Secret Service, a specific diameter, where people who had signed up to go in would go in, and they were checked with the standard checking procedures that are in place. This building was outside that standard procedure. And by the way, that was a fact that was recognized by the local law enforcement when they got there. And so that brings up the next question. Well, this guy, what did he do? Well, this guy followed a pattern that has been documented and seen before. We're not reinventing a new wheel. Generally, these kind of individuals, this is a lone wolf. This is a person, he's called a lone wolf, person who for whatever reason focuses on an individual and wants to kill him. I want you to think about that. I mean, wow, to kill a person, that's mentally, that's a huge step. And this is a 20-year-old kid who's studying to be an engineer, who, his room or his people who are friends at his high school, graduating, I think 21, called him a sort of a loner type. But he had no history of anything. He's outside the perimeter, and here's where this communication issue comes in. There are actually pictures that one of the sniper teams, the emergency service unit from Butler County, took a picture of this guy ahead of time. We're talking at least 30 to 40 minutes ahead of the shooting. What has come out since that time is a lot more information. And if you don't mind, I'll just sort of go over what is considered the timeline so that the audience understands this isn't a random thing. When Crooks found out that Trump was coming, He goes ahead and he signs up to go there. He actually this occurred on July 13th. He goes to the site on July 7th. So that's, a little less than a week. All right. What do you think when a person goes to an area? Is there going to be anybody there? And the chances are, come on, you can go to our own tri-state fair exposition and rodeo, and it's an empty parking lot, and there's a lot of buildings. There are staff people that may be out and about. I'm not even sure there were anybody here. Okay, so he goes out. This is very interesting. This is pre-planning. So he goes out and surveils the site. It's about a 30-minute drive, and then he comes back home. Part of the process. On the day before, and this is another interesting thing, the gun he used was legally bought by his father. No problems with it. We're not sure, but evidently he was given the gun or bought the gun from his dad. He did a lot of target practice. So to say this is the first time he went up and shot this weapon would be wrong. My guess is he was an individual who liked to go shoot. I mean, he was a loner. He didn't have any friends, if any. And so this is a great hobby that you could go out and shoot. And by the way, once you shoot any kind of weapon, you've got to get familiar with it enough so that if you're, shooting a handgun, for example, where's that, your sight picture going to be at 25 yards and at 50 yards? A rifle is the same thing, You've got a weapon there that can shoot a very long distance. So you put targets that are 50, 100 yards, maybe 150 yards away, depending upon the range. And you sight that gun in on that so that when you pull the trigger and you retrieve that target, you get your pattern up there. And you generally hoped when you become proficient to have a nice tight pattern that's in what is called a kill zone, and depending upon the type of target. So you want to maximize, you want 10s, because as the 10 is the center of the target, and then it goes 9, 8, 7. You understand? Okay.
So in this case, if he's scouting out a week ahead, you're thinking perhaps he sighted the weapon to approximately the distance, because he wouldn't have known where the stage would be, maybe?
Great question, and I believe you're absolutely right on that.
Yeah.
Because he had to look at the environment, the venue. He did enough research to know that the Secret Service would bring snipers, so there would be snipers there. He also knew, I believe, that the emergency service unit from Butler County had snipers. I mean, this is an outside event. You're gonna need a number of snipers, and you're gonna need them in a position that they can not only look over the venue area, but they have coverage on the roofs of those buildings that are within the range of a weapon, like a rifle, an AR, that should be, you can shut that thing in for 2.5, 300 yards. I mean...
So why isn't 200 yards or 300 yards inside the perimeter? Because then that just makes the space you have to protect too large.
Yeah.
Okay, so then is it the sniper's role to be looking at the roofs that are outside the perimeter? It falls mostly on them?
Right. That's everybody's role, not just one, but the sniper's positions are based upon accessibility to seeing other sniper positions. When they do a walkthrough, you walk through with all sorts of people from the agencies involved, because everybody's looking at a different security risk. And you bring in a sniper, they look at things totally different than a street cop would. Right. Okay, and understandably so. Yeah. Okay. And
because in this situation, like you said,
yeah,
an up-close attack could have also been. The attack could have been made with a handgun if somebody could get that into the.
Right.
So I need people whose mindset is going to be, I need to stop an attack from 6 feet away.
Yep.
And we need to be able to stop an attack from 130
Right.
yards away.
Absolutely right. And then throw in a bomb or two.
And like you said, chemical attacks.
Or a
diversions
chemical attack.
Yeah, okay.
And we also have to consider another thing. And he used this. Drones.
Oh, I didn't know this.
Yes. See, this is where the integration of information and any kind of countermeasures, and the fact that we have technology today that can be flown over things and you can assess, and you look at things. You go up in a helicopter and look over an area. That's different than driving your car around. And so this drone provided that aerial view. He had a drone on the day of the assassination that he put up, his own drone, flew it over the rally site for 11 minutes. The Secret Service has technology to have their own drones and to go ahead and basically alert that there's a drone in the area and take it out. Well, on this particular day, about 2.5 hours before the shooting, his drone's up. Secret Service drone, they couldn't get it operational for some reason. Okay, so so you add in another dimension. See, I didn't have drones. I mean, I had prototypes, but when I was doing this, drones and our technology is adding many more layers of concerns that we're now dealing with as facts of life. Okay?
So is the shooter taking the drone and then thinking, now the shooter can assess, okay, their sniper teams are here and here, this rooftop is open. Do you think that's sort of then a decision he made at that point, or do you think he had that rooftop in mind from a week before?
That's a great question, and I don't know if we're ever going to know the answer to that one too, because he's dead. But you're absolutely right in saying it provides angles of attack, for lack of a better term. All right. As the day progresses, he is photographed ahead of time. And when I mean ahead of time, I believe, and I got to look at my notes here, he was picked up and photographed at 5:30 by one of the SWAT officers as a suspicious person. A couple other things here. His photo is then passed on. Our technology today, we can go get it out all over the place, and that's exactly what happened. But they can't find him. This is another thing. I think this is I think it's because we have two things going on. You're getting closer to the arrival of the president. That arrival sends electricity through the air, for lack of a better term. People are now really, okay, he's coming, he's going to be here. So you got all sorts of adrenaline highs and all this stuff. And then you throw in, okay, we got this guy. We got to find this guy. But you can't find him. That's going to drive cops. They're going to say, we got to find this guy. They're going. They're hunting, and they can't find him. So, and then I'm going to read.
Is that because he was outside the perimeter? And
he's outside the perimeter. You're absolutely right.
And are they looking outside the perimeter, or do we know?
Well, yeah, they were, because that's where they got the picture. He was outside the perimeter by that AGR building. All right. Then he's seen again at 5:56. Now remember, the shooting takes place about 6:10, 6:11. Okay, and he's by this AGR building. All right. They have a picture of this guy going up at 6:08, that he's on the AGR building, but they have two roofs on the building. They have a lower roof and an upper roof. Well, the lower roof was hidden because they had snipers on that floor inside the building, and that's where they started looking at him. One other thing I failed to mention. When he was photographed at about 5:30 or so, he was photographed using a rangefinder and in his phone. And to me, how many people walk around a site? I mean, I'm just trying to play devil's advocate. A rangefinder. That tells me
a separate device from his phone.
A separate device.
Yeah. So like a rangefinder, like a golfer or a hunter would use.
Golfer, hunter, those kind of things. You got it. So
immediate red flag, I would think.
4 or 5 red flags.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Okay. So, and again, they can't find the guy. Then at 6:08, they see what appears to be him. They called him a subject. He's up on that lower roof. He got up, crawling up the HVAC ladder, and he's going into place. He's literally
going on the roof or in the building.
On the roof.
Okay. So let me ask this. I had heard that he had brought his own ladder. You're saying that's not true. He used a ladder.
That's a question that is unanswered.
Okay.
Because he did buy a ladder, but they have not. There's no indication he used that ladder. And you can, again, if you go out a week or so ahead of time to where this place is and do surveillance, you're going to get an idea of potential places that you could be to assassinate an individual. We got our mindset's got to remember we're dealing with an individual who's been studying assassination. He is looking for tactical advantage. And another thing that's interesting about this, there's no plan to escape. Okay, there was no plan to escape.
So when you say plan, you're saying did they find? Is it the plan just what they sort of built up from the evidence of the different things that he did, visit the site and buy different things, or did he have some kind of document? Or
he had, well, first, what they did find, really, they looked at a variety of who he was talking to with his computer, okay? To say that they've got an exact plan, it didn't exist. Okay. And the other thing I think is a point here, and I could be all wet, but I believe he visited this site many times. If this is like a place where they had county fairs or anything like that, as a kid, you would,
events,
sure, anything like that. So they could, so I believe he may have known the place.
It's like you said before, that's why the local law enforcement has to be so involved, because local knowledge is so important.
And that's the key.
Yeah. Whereas you or I, we couldn't go to Butler. We couldn't pull off an assassination, nor could we protect it because we don't know anything about it.
Right.
Right. Okay.
So, but again, I want to go back because there's one other thing that occurred here that I wasn't aware of, and that is the cops, the local cops, said we got to find this kid, and we're gonna boost you up to this lower roof because that's where they thought he was. Now, this is very important. So at 6:11, they get a cop on top of that lower roof. Now, listen to this. He's up there. He encounters the subject there. And the subject swings around with his AR-15 and points it at him. The cop reaction is to go down. He couldn't get his gun. And I think what happened is he dropped to the ground. I don't know if that's a 6-foot drop, an 8-foot drop, and I understand that. I mean, the cop's reaction, you've got an AR looking at you, boom, you go down. Right after that is when the shots occurred. And then he was taken out.
Who took him out?
The Secret Service snipers took him out.
And that's the iconic picture that we see with the spotter and the sniper.
Yeah,
okay.
That's that picture that again follows. And
so can I ask a little bit about the shooting?
Sure.
Itself. I'm thinking, like you said, if you've got a target and you're trying to create a grouping, you're probably shooting a target like that in the body, not in the head. Do you think he was aiming for the head and missed by a little bit, or do you think he was aiming in the general direction and missed by a lot?
That is a great question. I don't think I can answer for one reason. For me to answer that accurately, I'd like to see his target that he had shot recently, because I have found, even shooting a handgun, that there are still basic things you've got to remember that I thought would be ingrained after being a police officer and carrying weapons for as long as I have. And it's back to a reflex action. What you're training, that's when your training kicks in. So to say, in my mind, to ask me that question, I said I would start by saying, what kind of scores did he post, or do they have any records? Let me see that. The other thing is, with an automatic rifle, that AR, it's got a select switch on it to manual or semi-automatic. He could have a magazine in it that has 15 to 30, a banana clip, all this stuff. And so that's a great question, but we've already seen the results. So he would have killed the president. That would have been a death shot, and he had 7 other opportunities.
So let me ask about that. In my head, my naive head, and like I said, I've done a lot of shooting, because I'm an experienced shooter, but I'm sitting here thinking, in that kind of setting, I'm not pulling the trigger as fast as I can pull it 8 times in, whatever you said, 6 seconds or something like this. I'm trying to make the first one count.
Okay.
So because I didn't know about this scenario where said there was a police officer that had found him immediately before the shooting, that potentially explains that. And maybe he had, if we had a professional sniper that was trying to make this shot, he's trying to make one bullet count.
Yes.
And then follow up as necessary,
right.
Probably. And so in this case, perhaps the shooter got rushed because he was encountered.
I think I see this. I've been through similar experiences, and I can tell you in what happened to me. You get a gun pointed at you, it's this big, and it grows. And your reflex action is take it down. The distance where that officer was to where that rifle was, I'm going to guess with at least 5 or 6 feet, because he had just got himself up on top of that when he got up and Crooks turned and there was the AR-15. His immediate reaction was to go down, and he went down off the roof and onto the ground. Now, your point is a very good point. So here's a cop, and here's this kid who's trying to kill the president, and he's just been spotted. What is his reaction going to be? He's going to roll over and take him out, okay? And he's pulling the trigger. As fast as you can pull that trigger, those bullets are flying, okay? And once that sound was, they got him, okay? But he got 8 rounds off. And so my guess is, no, it wasn't nice and peaceful. You're at the range, you're shooting a paper target that isn't moving. And, and you got all the time in the world. I believe he knew he was done. Cops got him, and they know he was up there. Yeah. And so I believe he said, I'm taking this, and he went, and he got shot and killed.
So I'd heard, I don't know if this is true, you know how media is these days. I had heard that there had been one of the sniper teams on the security side had requested that they be able to that they'd already spotted that the sniper teams had spotted him and requested to shoot him and didn't get a response in time. Is that true? Or
I'd not heard that.
Okay, so probably
not. But the sniper team, the other thing is, this is where we get into issues with communications and issues with areas of responsibility and who's in charge of the event. Okay? If the threat is a viable threat, in this particular case, the sniper doesn't need any permission.
Okay, so there's no chain of communication.
There's no chain of communication. Take him on. It's just that simple. He's already shot. He's dead.
So what, in that situation, let's say that the coordination between the street officers that were checking the roof and the Secret Service sniper team is that, hey, we're looking at this roof, and that's something that the sniper team knows. And then they spot that individual, but he hasn't done anything yet. That's going to come down to whether or not they can make out a weapon.
Well, I think...
Or if I get up on a roof for completely unrelated reasons to the president, I didn't know, I'm up here just checking the HVAC system. Am I liable to get shot in that situation?
Well, again, we now know in retrospect he had a collapsible stock on that AR. We know that was inside his book or his knapsack. They also found explosives.
The rifle was in a backpack.
Yeah, it was in a backpack.
Okay, see, I was thinking you had to have a bigger
backpack.
Impressive.
They also found two remote detonators for two bombs that were inside his car. They also found that this was another aspect of this guy. He had ordered bomb-making material. He had constructed two bombs that were in his car. The detonator that he had was turned off. The bomb that he made at home was too primitive to go ahead, but it was in the developing stages. So, again, bombs, cars, diversion. I mean, you can speculate all you want, but what the evidence indicates, he built two bombs. And they brought in the bomb squad once they found that detonator, found his car, and found the bombs inside the car. And the bombs could have been operational, except the detonator he had turned off.
Do we know if the Secret Service sniper team was aware of where they thought he was, or were they alerted by the shots?
That is a great question. And I believe that the Secret Service sniper, that level of competency for a federal agency is extremely high. And so the equipment they have, you can only imagine. It's the top of the line, the best of the best. So when these guys are up here, when I've talked to the local SWAT team, they traverse areas, and they are looking at stuff with magnifying glasses that are, I mean, you're going to be able to tell you got a gun or you don't. I mean, and the thing is, I believe that they knew, they had heard the chatter, they knew in what area this suspicious person was. It was confirmed by the sniper ESU Butler unit that they believed he was at the AGR building, and that would, then they knew where that was, and then once he opened up, he shot him.
What was the reaction time between when the shooter took his shots and the Secret Service took his shots?
I believe within seconds.
Okay, so I mean, either he's swiveling and shooting, which you're saying is possible because he's going to be that level of competent, or he's already looking that way, and for some reason didn't shoot until after.
Well, and again, I believe that the cop that spotted him threw his timing off. That would be a normal thing. He would know that he's been spotted. He would know he had a fraction of time because he would know that they were there. All they had to do was go down a roof to get them, or up a roof, or through a window. And so, I mean, he said, I'm going for it. And so, crank, 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 and then boom, he did. And the other thing is, this stuff, we're not talking minutes here, we're talking seconds. And I think that's hard for people who aren't familiar with the speed at which you can pull the trigger on a weapon.
Any kind of combat, right?
Yeah, you name it. And so, and like I said, you start dealing with the snipers that are with the FBI or at that level, even some of the snipers, these major departments, they are without a doubt professional. And
so do you think there was mistakes made at that juncture, where one of the sniper teams had already seen him and didn't shoot for some reason? Or do you think they didn't have the information to even know where he was, and that they just were reacting to that situation?
Well, let me clarify. It was a sniper team on foot because they didn't have enough manpower when it was a part of the sniper team that called him in originally as a potential suspect. So to say there was a sniper team and they were up here, no, the sniper team was on the move. They weren't stationary because they didn't have enough manpower. So I believe that the cop that they boosted up was part of the sniper team, and when Crooks ran around and saw him and was going to probably shoot him, he dropped, and I believe he dropped on the roof and then fell off the roof onto the ground. And then all Crooks went, he just changed, just rolled over and opened up.
And where was the sniper team that took him out?
Well, the sniper team from the Secret Service that took him out was in place on a building roof.
And that's the picture that we've seen?
That's the picture that you'll see.
Okay, and that's the team that...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the team that took him out.
So you've talked about the weapon a little bit, so I don't necessarily want to belabor that.
Sure.
But that's not a rare weapon. If I'm thinking about the kind of weapons that would be used in an attack, that's top of the list. And
yes.
The details of it might be different, like you said.
Fact.
So it baffles me then that a roof 130 yards away is not priority number one almost. I guess it's easy to look, hindsight is 20/20, but...
Yeah. Well, again, you have to look at the rules and who's in charge. Okay, and this is where you get back to this is what I call this incident command system, which is designed to have accountability and who is in charge. And that is the most critical thing in incidents like this. There are a number of issues that have come out as a result of this. And one of the biggest issues was that when you have incidents like this, you have what they call an incident command center. And by the way, there's a lot of initials, like an incident command system is ICS. Incident command center is ICC. I mean, it's like Secret Service and the FBI, they have titles and acronyms and initials and welcome to the world today. Okay. One of the bigger problems was you should have had a unified command center. There wasn't a unified command center here. You had the local police and the state police here, and you had the Secret Service over here. Okay. No. You have communication levels federal, you have communication state, you have communication locally. There wasn't, if you are in two separate buildings, how do you join the communications to act? The protocol that is put out really wasn't the individuals who were in charge were seniors, but the agents themselves appear to have been recently trained. These are not seasoned Secret Service people. The reason for that?
Which Secret Service were rookies?
The Secret Service, the people that were guarding the president, it appears that they were recently trained.
So you said candidates get Secret Service assigned to them all the time. That's true. But past presidents,
yes,
of which Trump was already one,
right.
This is confusing to me that you're describing that we'd have rookie Secret Service people assigned to a past president,
right,
who's a candidate. If you got somebody, the sixth most popular candidate on one side or the other, and they get rookie detail, that doesn't necessarily surprise me.
Again, let's go back to what we reflected earlier. You have a presidential candidate jumping point to point to point to point. You do not have infinite manpower resources, so you make do with what you have. but you have to do it efficiently. Do more with less and make it more efficient. And that's exactly what I think was going on here. You got to pick where the candidate is going, then what resources do you have at that location that you can draw from? He was drawing, the agent that was in charge of this was drawn from Pittsburgh, a major place that had that. But again, we're talking with limited members. It was the same problem with the local police. They had snipers going off duty and on duty, and they could have used more manpower. We haven't even talked about, I would have liked to have seen who's running the security as they were checking there, and then what about people outside the area? I mean, why didn't we have people? Heck, I'd have had 3 or 4 drones up for cracking ice. But again, we're looking at major issues that have resulted in a director, quote, resigning. Yeah. So
Kimberly Cheatle, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what's your take on the reaction of the part of the Secret Service team that was on stage immediately adjacent to Trump? Because there are some pictures of the immediate aftermath that don't look so good, where a couple of the Secret Service agents are bodily shielding President Trump, and a couple of Secret Service agents seem to be not bodily shielding President Trump. Is that as bad as it looks, or is that just...
I believe it depends upon when that picture was taken. Okay, now I'm going to be right up front with you. They did what they needed to do. Secret Service is trained to protect the individual. That means you sacrifice your life if necessary to save the president. So they make a human shield. But then I'm going to insert something that I've seen before. We're dealing with Donald Trump. Okay? Donald Trump is not going to cower down. We've indications with his prior term in office. His actions are not one of being cowardly. To me, when he pumped his fist up and he was out there, that's Donald Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, to say anything else, that's not Donald Trump.
Yeah.
What you saw occurred, those agents could try to leave, in my mind.
And he's not a small person.
He's going to get that fist up there. Yeah. He's going to pump it up that he's okay. And they got him the heck out of there. And that's what they're trained to do. Again, dealing with presidents, they want to go out into the crowd. I mean, that is a fact of life. And no matter how dangerous or what your threat assessment is or whatever the case may be, they're going to go out in the crowd. Okay?
So let me ask you this. I don't mean to put you on the spot too much. I'm just thinking as it goes here. So obviously the most famous presidential assassination is a rifle. But then seems like Lincoln, the Reagan attempt, the Robert Kennedy Sr., these are all handgun attempts, right? Mm-hmm. So if I'm the person coordinating this attempt in that kind of setting, after the fact, as somebody who's here going, why is there a roof 130 yards away? Like even a kind of average level shooter can probably make that shot on a man-sized target. It seems so obvious, but maybe somebody who's putting together that is thinking, well, it seems like historically most of our assassinations in the U.S. of high-level political figures, a lot of those are handguns. It's going to be way harder to get a rifle into an event than a handgun. Is how much a role do you think that played in this particular situation?
Well, they did a little more research, and the AR-15 has been used in most of the mass shootings in the United States since 2000.
So, I mean, mass shooting, that's a lot of different scenarios. So I'm talking about like specifically like we're trying to assassinate one particular person, like a targeted thing.
And I would say that the availability of these type of weapons has increased And there could be a variety of reasons for that. I look at Vietnam gear and done, and then you have modifications. But the accessibility of handguns and the accessibility of rifles, we have all these laws in place, but there's so many ways to circumvent them. In this particular case, it was not circumvented.
Right.
He has no record. He's a loner. His mom and dad cooperate fully. My guess is they are suffering through this like a family who lost somebody unexpected, a 20-year-old, and so.
Yeah, 20-year-olds have a lot of life ahead. They shouldn't be doing stuff like this. Yeah. So, in this case, then, you're saying there's a lot of different failures, some of which we would chalk up to just trying to cover too much area in an open space with not enough manpower. Some of it seems to be strategic and technical types of issues. Mm-hmm. But if I was playing the opposite of devil's advocate, if I were trying to defend this case, and I said, well, it seems like they would focus on handguns. You're saying, no, that's not a viable defense of the people that are organizing this protection.
Well, if you were playing devil's advocate, you saw the results. Yeah. And again, I am not an expert, but when you read the experts that are involved with the review of this, and you see consistent errors in command, responsibility, accountability, and you see lacks of communication gaps, these things are critical when it goes down. You've all got to be in the same page, and you can't be in separate areas. You've got to be a unified command center with equipment that you got a person who is seeing and going to act, getting a message to the person in charge to make that decision sometimes in nanoseconds. So I really understand the manpower stuff, which I feel was a critical error, as was communications. But there was, to me, it seems, a lack of what they call unified command. And that's where that incident command system was never in place that I found at this incident. And when you have the locals who know the things and are working, locals being the sheriffs, the townships, this particular place, the state police. I mean, these guys work together all the time. This is not some new deal. But when you bring in a federal agency, and then another thing was the federal agency on the day of this rally didn't go to a briefing.
Oh.
Okay, that was another thing that was brought up. They did not attend that briefing. There was nobody from the federal agency there. So you have a breakdown of communication in several areas that, again, to me, this appears to be a lot bigger issue.
So I want to turn to the kind of the fallout of all this in a minute, but you kind of teased whenever you're setting this up that there were some other things that are not widely known. Did you kind of get all those things worked into our conversation? Did you have some other twists for us?
No, literally, Lee, in my opinion, I spent a week reading what was written on this. I even went back to see Gerald Ford, 2 assassination attempts, handguns, okay? I tried to find after-action reports on that. I found 2 things. One was that Ford wanted to change things, which a president has the authority to do whatever he wants. The modification with Ford, they gave him a London fog trench coat that was bulletproof, and he didn't like that, so he wore a bulletproof vest that matched his suit. I also found,
Do you think that explains why the shooter might not want to have risk a body shot, as he didn't know if Trump was wearing some kind of armor?
well, again, it's
Do we
the
know if Trump was wearing armor?
well, I don't know the answer to that. Okay, but again, AR-15 headshot, 400 feet, not knowing this guy, but know that this guy has practiced. You saw, he almost got him.
Yeah.
He did kill people directly behind
Yeah.
him that were at a level.
He hit Trump.
Oh yeah, he hit him.
He did kill him, but he hit him.
He hit him.
So
those are
irrelevant, maybe.
Yeah. And
Sorry, continue with your stuff about Ford. I didn't mean to.
Well, and the only other thing I can add to this is this has become a benchmark for a lot of things. And what I mean by that, the Secret Service has changed. I mean, they are mandating changes now. And at the cost of a human life, or almost 4 human lives. But actually, you got to count the shooter, so now we're up to 5.
Right.
So this is driving change. And unfortunately, that's a direct reflection. Change, many times, if not all the time, in our society is after a crisis. Right. Okay. So that's what you have going here. I also believe that the leadership of the Secret Service is under very close scrutiny. That the idea of complacency, routine, that's something that you battle every day in law enforcement. And the longer you're in, that battle is harder and harder because, well, here comes another traffic stop, or here's another domestic, or here's this, or here's that.
So now you're struggling between experience versus complacency.
Yeah.
That's different.
And then the communication. We had radios. I had 3 radios at an event. Okay, I had the federal agency radio. I had the state agency, and I had all the locals. Okay, but I had a team of officers, many of which are commanders, who are involved in that incident command center with specific responsibilities. But when you're dealing at this level, it's the Secret Service that's in charge of the venue because of who's involved.
So let's talk about the fallout. Who ended up sort of paying the price? We've talked a little bit about the director of the Secret Service here. Who else paid the price, if you will, and why?
Okay. I don't know if we're ever going to get a good picture on that, because once you get inside an agency that's a personnel action, I have no comment. You ever heard that before?
Uh-huh.
Okay, now you realize I expect that anybody in a command position following this, their careers are terminated and they're done. That's what I expect. Because
just
the
director, or who
magnitude,
else?
Sir?
Just the director, or who else?
Oh, I think the director who was in charge of the planning of that, who was actually on site, and the commander of that.
So all the kind of checkpoints down the chain.
I think it's a domino effect. In fact, I'm about willing to bet you $1 million that's exactly what happened. But you're not going to find that.
Right.
Because of the agency involved, and this is a personnel matter. So it's when you have those kind of incidences and some of the experiences in law enforcement, it starts with the chief.
You think that's just on the Secret Service side, or you think the local and the state?
I really believe that the state and local police did all they could do in this incident. I truly believe that. I see no indication after the testimonies and the experts who reviewed that the local cops did what they were supposed to do. The failure lies in Secret Service.
And some of that seems to be at a commander level, and some of that seems to be at a level of having to inexperienced people, in part because they're spread too thin.
Right.
That's really fascinating. So are there then changes that you would see for law enforcement agencies to prevent similar types of events in the future?
Well,
Procedural things, maybe?
the biggest change that I would see is the need to come together and work the problem as a joint operation with a specific model, which is this incident command center model. Areas of responsibility, who is in charge, delineated, known. Other things, what are the known threats? So you have intelligence. You have technology threats now that you have to be careful of. And you have incredible staffing things that you have to now take a look at. The biggest thing is reliance upon people that you've never worked with, but your lives depend upon. And that is a fact of life. And so you are relying, it's like a chain link fence. It's only as good as the weakest link is. Same principle here.
Right.
And so you have, and the other thing, you have to create, your leadership has to create an environment. Hey, let's work together on this, okay? And you saw a working together in our country after the 9/11 events. I have had, in my experience, issues with those federal levels on a number of areas. And here, this one incident is a great example of we're in two camps here. There's none of this. It's this. And so this is yet a reminder that when it comes to the security of an individual, this is not a federal responsibility when it comes into your venue. It's a joint responsibility where information flows freely and nobody is taking credit for this or that. We have to jointly come together and solve the problem. You saw that in the '84 Olympic Games. The one incident that occurred there was an LAPD cop who put a simulated pipe bomb on a bus that was transporting one of these high-level teams. But and it can work, by the way. I mean, it does work. I've been blessed to have that experience. I believe people today, police chiefs across the United States, would say, yes, when we had this, we all worked together, and so you just don't know about it. You only hear about the bad stuff. But I can honestly say I believe that at that level, when you come together and work together to solve a problem and you're over it, let's give everybody the pat on the back. Okay, let's not, oh, I got this and I got this. You don't need that fragmentation. This is a joint project. You all win or you all lose. In this particular case, Secret Service lost big time.
So if you're looking at it, different things that you mentioned, seems like the coordinated command center seems to probably been the biggest mistake, because then this information, the version of this that you've told after having researched it compared to, my fragmented media intake, it's kind of different. It seems like there's multiple junctures where they had a picture of him. If they'd had a drone up, maybe they could have found him. If they'd had a larger perimeter, maybe he doesn't have access to that roof. If the sniper teams are coordinated differently, maybe they get to him before the officer gets on the roof. And those are just the ones that come back to my mind here right off the top, let alone probably several other things that you've mentioned along the way. It's kind of astounding then that there could be that many places where this could have been prevented. And it makes the event seem like almost even worse in my mind than it seemed before we'd had this conversation.
Yeah. Well, and again, what I knew about this event. And then after doing this research, and again, we're looking at an event that has been scrutinized multiple times by multiple agencies and multiple federal inquiries. And so you learn. And to me, when I use that term, this is a benchmarking event for the Secret Service. I don't think we're done with the changes there yet.
So we're over an hour now, so I'd like to bring it in for a landing. And I think to me the most interesting question remaining is, we kind of talked about that outdoor venue, the desire for public officials to be in close contact with people. How, as in the wake of this event, would you like to see law enforcement agencies balance that need for that public accessibility during political events with the imperative of the safety, given that, maybe it's just recency bias that we've seen 3 assassination attempts and one of them was successful just at the end of 2024?
Well, I anticipate, and one of the things that literally drives any kind of protected agency, it really drives them nuts, is the need to get out into the crowd. And that is going to remain a fact of life in an American democracy. And that hasn't changed in many years, and I do not anticipate that it will change. So you have to understand that is the mindset. So your job is to protect that mindset and that individual from a variety of attacks. The close quarter, like you saw with Ford, always present, always present. The idea of a sniper, always present. We're going to look at drones as this new technology evolves. That's now an issue. Are there other issues? There's bombs. There are, I'm doing research now looking at how Russia has introduced the use of poisons, which now has become yet another threat. The other thing is many of these individuals are lone wolves. They are not coordinating groups, even though there are indications of groups out there. There seems to be one thing that was missing with crooks, that in the research that I mentioned before that was done on prior assassination, and it's similar to the research that I've done on school shootings, and that is the person involved communicates the threat well in advance to somebody. There's no indication here that crooks did that, yet in other cases, and like the school shootings, somebody knew about it ahead of time, and they could have told somebody, and it could have been prevented. I feel that's a critical point that is going to exist still today, and that it's imperative that if you have or heard somebody say that gets reported as quickly as possible so that law enforcement can act upon that. It's the same thing true with somebody's going to assassinate somebody. They can't keep their mouth shut. So they got to tell somebody. And the key to this is that person getting that information to law enforcement to prevent the attack. We don't hear about the number of attacks and assassinations that were prevented. Right. We only see the results of those that were successful.
My guest today has been Dr. Harry Hueston. Harry, thanks for joining us on the EconBuff.
Thank you for this opportunity. Look forward to doing more.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the EconBuff. You can find all previous episodes on YouTube at EconBuff Podcast. You can check out our website at econbuffpodcast.wixsite.com. That's WIXSIT.com. You can contact us at econbuffpodcast@yahoo.com.